Everyone, this is Dr. KatherineT.Kelly, and I'm using a little strange humor this morning. Actually, I was having fun pulling this up to talk about the places that scare you, the things that scare you, the events that scare you, and how this is actually related to the soul. So I'm going to move out of the way so you can see this image. I actually used this in an alignable networking group kind of event that I did yesterday. And, since this is Halloween, I thought, okay, let's do something about fear because everybody on this planet experiences fear. And right now, and I laugh out of nervousness more than anything, but right now, the fear that is going on in the world, the people who are intentionally trying to stir fear, I mean, it's just crazy how this is happening. But it's also poignant because fear hits us at the core. Fear does affect who we are. And so I want to explain a little bit about, or maybe a lot about, how fear really is affecting our soul or how fear comes from our soul wounds. So, first of all, we can have experiences in any given lifetime that obviously create fear. So, trauma of any sort can cause fear, and trauma can be defined in lots of different ways. I'm going to be explaining that in my next book, Trauma Treating Body, Mind, and Soul. I'm sorry, I have so much going on today. I'm trying to remember everything I'm doing. But the next book that I'm in my Soul of Psychology series is going to be on trauma. And every single person on this planet has trauma. Every single person has fear. And so I want to relate some things for you. I want to put the body, mind, and soul aspect of this together. And I also want to help you understand from that essence of who we are, how fear affects us. And I'm sorry, having these hands around me is a little bit interesting because they look like alien hands, although I know it's supposed to be a spooky guy. Actually, it could be an alien as it is. So that's the real me, is playing around. I have a sense of humor that I use basically to combat fear, to combat stress, to combat anything that might need to be lightened up a little bit. Because, and I'm going to say this, the opposite of fear is love. And the first way to get rid of fear is to bring that loving feeling in. And I know that is the hardest thing to do, but it is diabolically opposite. We cannot have joy and fear at the same time. We cannot have love and fear at the same time. We can have fear of love and those kinds of combinations of things, but we can't really have two feelings at the same time when it comes to that deep visceral kind of experience that we have. So I want to explain trauma a minute. So here we go. So trauma can come from so many different things. We can have trauma from things we don't even remember. And I want to explain how this happens from an energetic perspective. Now, if we think of everything as energy and every aspect of what we experience is a part of experiencing energy, then you have to think about what I call the energetic imprints that get left on our soul, the energetic imprints that get left on who we are in this way that affects us. It's like this thin layer of an experience that gets placed on top of who we are. And so our identity changes, our experience of things changes, our reactions to things change. So any trauma that is fear-based is going to leave layers of those energetic imprints on us. And if we've had multiple stressful events, those layers are going to stack up. Those layers are going to get to the place where they feel so thick that we cannot remember who we are. We cannot remember from that fear base who it is we once were. We can't get back to our reactions prior to those times. That's where PTSD comes in. That's where phobias come in. That's where OCD comes in. That's where a lot of those energetic imprints get left on us from that deep level. And that's why a lot of traditional treatment can't get at it. Now, we can do EMDR, which is a mode of trying to release trauma. We can do tapping. We can do all kinds of different traditionally based treatments. But until you get to those energetic layers that meet at what that fear has created for us at that deep level, we're not going to get anywhere. So we do have to approach fear from a body, mind, and soul perspective. And what that means is that we have to figure out where in the body we are somatically holding it. And somatic means basically where we hold the energy of the emotion, whatever that emotion is. And that emotion can get kind of stuck or lodged in our energetic system from a body perspective. We have to figure out where in our body we feel fear. We have to go through the whole process of identifying the cognitive thoughts that we have about the fear and how they lead to more fear. Because I swear, with panic attacks, one thing that happens is that the first panic attack leads to all of the others. Because whatever is causing the panic attack to begin with causes the next one, because then we suddenly attach another energetic layer of meaning to, oh my gosh, I think I might have another panic attack. So what do? We have another panic attack. So it is one of those things that fear begets fear. And that's why it's so interesting when you start peeling away those layers, because it is like one more layer, one more layer, more layer, and you have to get to the cause of it. You have to get to the core of whatever is happening so that you can remove those energetic layers altogether. So, body aspect, mind aspect, soul aspect, that's where past life work comes in. That is where soul realignment comes in. That's where basically going through the energetic system from a soul perspective comes in. Now, I know that's language that a lot of people don't know, but that is what I'm trying to do, is help people understand the body, mind, and soul aspects of any kind of concern, whether it's physical or emotional, and get to the bottom of it from that soul level. Now, I also want to get to the point where I help you understand that there are only two fears that all fears can be boiled down to. Every single fear can be boiled down to one or the other when you really do the therapeutic work to get there. One is that you're going to be alone, and the other is that you're not good enough. And you might at face value think that no, there's more fears than that. But really, those are the two fears that every single fear can be boiled down to. Every single trauma can be boiled down to. Every single energetic reaction that is related to fear can be boiled down to one of those others. Now, when I work with someone about a fear, I help them peel away those layers to help them identify and pin down which one of those it is. Now, at the core of those two fears is one of two things, basically fear or love. If you fall into the fear category, you're going to have a very hard time, fear category in terms of reactions. If you fall into that, is if that's where you go, which is where most people go, where most humans go, then you are going to fall into that, I call it looping, but that looping reaction of going over and over and over the same kind of fear. And what does that do? It drives it deeper into you. However, the strategy I use is teaching people how to step out of that fear, look at it from a loving perspective, look at it from how can you look at the basically the dichotomy, the basic opposite of what you are I'm trying to explain this too fast, what you're experiencing within that fear base. Pull back long enough to figure out what is the most loving thing I can tell myself right now and get that energy moving through you, because love is an energy, fear is an energy. So you have to do a lot of different levels of work to really eliminate a fear. And that's where soul work comes in, because the soul work can actually get through and get through to the deepest levels of this much faster than a lot of the cognitive work can, and a lot of just the basic physical somatic work can. Now, I am an advocate for all three, absolutely, because I do think for the best healing, the most radiant healing, we have to get through the body, mind, and soul aspects. But when it comes to fear, it's complicated. When it comes to trauma, it's complicated. But when it comes to healing, it's not as complicated if you understand how to get there. It's just you have to, number one, identify, quote, the places that scare you. You have to identify, again, is it coming from the body, the mind, or the soul? And that's where a practitioner that understands all three is really going to be integral in helping you heal from this. But I wanted to kind of give you, there's all kinds of different ways that fears get planted in us. I want to give you a couple examples of they can be categorized as phobias, really, but really it wasn't. It was dismantled in a way that clearly it was just a representation of another kind of fear. So I had two clients that I worked with pretty intensely for a very long time. One had this fear of dogs. One had a fear of birds. Neither one had ever had in this lifetime any kind of negative experience with a dog or a bird. And so it was one of those things where we were trying to figure out, okay, what is the core of this? What is the fear? Now, most phobias and most OCD behaviors are really about like the fear of control, like losing control, fear of that you're not going to have control over something. So it is one of those things where I had to help both of those individuals get, and they're both females in this case, but I'm going to explain kind of the typical fears that males have versus females have in just a second. Um, but once we did a lot of the healing, once we understood, helped them understand, okay, where is the energetic in my body? Where am I holding this? What part of my body do I hold the energy of when I'm afraid of the birds, when I'm afraid of the dogs? What happens? So we identified that. I helped them identify what the thoughts are that come through their heads. Oh my God, this bird is going to come peck me. I don't know what I'm going to do. Even if they're outside, there's glass between this person. She was very concerned about it. So we had to kind of do some rationalization with what's happening in her mind versus what would happen in reality. Same thing with the dog. It was one of those things where this woman had never had the experience in this lifetime. I'm going to explain that in a second. In this lifetime of a dog hurting her. But over time, she got to the point where she was able to be comfortable around dogs. In fact, she got a dog. And part of that was because she got through the body, mind, and soul aspects of this. Now, for her, we never did actual past life work for her, but I had an inkling all along that she had had some past life injury, or maybe she was chased, maybe dogs were set upon her as she was fleeing something, because there was just this energy about it from a soul level that I think she did have some past life trauma that she was reacting to. But in dismantling the fears in this lifetime, she healed that. So there is the possibility of doing that. Now, the person with the bird was very interesting too. Again, no memory whatsoever. I didn't really get a sense necessarily that there was, we didn't do any past life work with her either. This was years ago. But it was one of those things where she had a very hard time with control. Hers was clearly about control. And she felt like something terrible was going to happen if birds came after her. And so I wouldn't doubt it if there was some past life stuff, but we didn't do anything to do that. But what was really interesting, the more I helped her let go of control, the more I helped her work through where in her body she was holding it, she basically started to have this attraction to birds. She actually bought bird feeders. She enjoyed when birds came and sat on the windowsill. She felt like they were visiting her. And it was one of those things where, and at Christmas, she actually decorated a tree with birds at one point after the healing was done. So it's interesting how fear can get planted in us, even if we don't have something to connect it to, but it is always about the energetic imprint that is within us. And sometimes you just have to go deeper to figure out what that is. So I know I'm throwing a lot of information out there. You know, the most basic and visceral fears that are across the world, fear of snakes, fear of the dark. Those are the two top fears anybody in the world usually has, is fear of snakes and fear of the dark. We don't know why we have such a visceral reaction to snakes. And there's lots of different spiritual interpretations of that. But the fear of the dark and fear of snakes are the top fears. Now, again, I'm going to go through just a few, very briefly, some of the fears that males have versus females have. Females do tend to, and I'm going to say this from a gender perspective, because from a past life or generational perspective, this is going to help you understand some of this stuff too. Women in general have more of a fear, or they attach fears to a lack of control. So whether it is a fear of a bird, a fear of a dog, a fear of something happening like a fire, and so they do checking, they do the OCD checking. It could be a fear of again, that lack of a control can be basically imprinted on anything. What's interesting about that, if you think about generational trauma, women have always been out of control. We have never had control. We have always had to be under the thumb or under the control of the masculine energies. And so in this lifetime, and in this era, I should say, in this era, there are a lot of women that are kind of working through this lack of control, and it comes out a lot of times in anxiety. It comes out in that PTSD response. It comes out in those fears that don't seem to make sense of the dogs or the cats or the dark or whatever it is. So for women, if you think about it from, again, a wider lens from a soul perspective, the generational trauma is basically playing out in this lifetime or in this era. And a lot of women are working through that because, again, generationally, women have never had power, have never had control. Men, on the other hand, they tend to have fears of height. It's a higher likelihood that men are going to have a fear of height than women are. Now, we can assume things. Again, that is still a lack of control, but it's one of those things where, men have always been the ones to climb buildings to build them. Men have always been the ones to be in wars. And so whether it is a war kind of situation where they fell from the sky because of planes or parachutes or whatever it might have been, it is more likely for men to have a fear of height, though. And so you have to look at this from what has been imprinted in people from generations past. That is soul healing kind of stuff. That is how we are energetically imprinted from our past lives, from generational trauma, from basically things that have come from the past and are presenting themselves to us now. And so it's another, and I smile with this because it's actually, I don't like to see people in that fear, but it's beautiful, really, when you get to the point when you can help them understand that there's stuff that's imprinted in them from the past or the past lives or the generational trauma that has played out now for them to heal and clear the slate. So my final statement to this, I could go on and on about how fear and trauma is imprinted in us energetically. But I want to just wrap this up a little bit by saying that not only, I'm going to say two things, that the soul healing aspect of this is so important. It is such an important part to start to get to, because if you have these fears and you don't know where they're coming from, and you don't really have a practitioner that is really doing soul healing, I would highly recommend looking at this from a deeper level, because there are all these different layers that are layered upon us as souls that may not make any sense in our life because basically we've never had this particular kind of trauma. But if you really know to do the soul healing and the soul work, there's probably something that can be healed. Take it forward, heal it, clear the slate. You never have that fear again. The second part of this is that I just want to emphasize is the whole idea that we are living in a time of fear. We are living in another time. It's, all the astrologers right now are saying that the planets are aligned in a way that is very much like, or actually exactly like, how they were aligned during the revolution time. So there's a lot of stirring, there's a lot of upset, there's a lot of fear that's being stirred because things are trying to get, I call it rototilled, so that we can change and evolve. The best possible thing you can do through this time is stay as grounded as you can, stay as calm as you can, and realize that you have some sort of agency over your fear. You have agency over whether or not you fall to fear. And I have told many, many clients over the last several months that if we fall to the fear that is trying to be instilled in us, then we lose anyway. So it's very important for us to stay very grounded, stay very mindful of our own evolution, our own process of healing, our own process of overcoming fear and managing fear and observing fear, not getting absorbed by it, so that we can get to this place of soul health. I talk about soul health as being about alignment, and that's what this is really about, is how do we stay aligned for ourselves? What is it that it will take for us to stay aligned? What is it that it will take for us to overcome that fear and live in that love consciousness rather than that fear? That is the goal. That is the mission. That is the essential nature of what humans are supposed to be doing right now, is become very clear with who they are and not fall into the external fears that are around them. So take that for what it's worth. I hope this has helped. Boy, I can go on and on about anxiety and fear and how it energetically sticks to us throughout these lifetimes, but that's also why the soul healing is so important. So love to hear your comments, love to hear your thoughts, and let me know if you have other things you want to add to this too. So have a wonderful day. I will be back soon with more information about the psychology and soul.